Hey guys, tonight we step into the flickering shadows of humanity's earliest memories, when our ancestors clung to life in caves, wrapped in animal skins, and surrounded by the deep growl of creatures that no longer roam our world. Picture it, the icy breath of wind whistling through cracks in stone, the damp smell of moss and wet rock, and the constant echo of dripping water. I bet you wouldn't survive a single night in a dark cave surrounded by prehistoric beasts. Even the bravest of us today might flinch at the sound of a lion's roar outside or the flutter of bat wings overhead. If this story brings you peace, please like and subscribe to our channel. Settle down, listen carefully, and together, let's enjoy this tender tale that will help you drift off into the most delightful, restful sleep. And before we begin, take a deep breath. Share your feelings, your worries, and let them out, leave them here, so they don't weigh you down tonight. Rest your head, slow your thoughts, and together we'll step into a soothing place where dreams begin to bloom. In these early days, humans have no solid homes. Their shelters are caves, stone chambers, carved by nature's patient hand. Some caves are wide and welcoming, with enough room for several families to huddle together. Others are narrow, forcing people to curl tightly against walls slick with condensation. The cave is both a protector and a prison. It shields them from rain, wind, and prowling predators, but it also traps cold air and amplifies every echo until even the smallest cough sounds like thunder. Every night is a struggle. Fires are not yet theirs to command, so they rely on the warmth of furs pressed shoulder to shoulder for survival. Children cling to their parents, while outside shadows move saber-toothed cats, hyenas and bears. Imagine trying to sleep while listening to a low growl that might be only steps away. It's a wonder anyone managed to close their eyes at all. Archaeologists have found evidence of humans living in caves across Europe, Africa, and Asia. The famous caves at Chauvet in France reveal not only shelter, but also the seeds of creativity, where ancient people later painted animals with astonishing skill. But long before paint touched walls, caves were chosen simply because they offered one thing above all: safety. Safety from storms that swept across open plains, and from predators whose eyes gleamed red in the darkness. Still, not every cave was friendly. Some collapsed without warning. Others were already claimed by enormous bears, leading to what must have been terrifying confrontations. Scientists still debate whether early humans chose caves deliberately for long-term dwelling, or if many of them were only temporary refuges during hunting trips or harsh winters. Some scholars argue that wood and hide shelters may have been just as common, but since those materials decay, caves are all that remain in the archaeological record. And let's not forget one quirky tidbit. Caves acted like refrigerators. Meat could be stored in the colder chambers deep within, safe from rot and pests. Imagine dragging half a mammoth leg into the darkness, stacking it on rocks, and hoping tomorrow's dinner didn't get snatched by a sneaky wolf. Not exactly your neighborhood grocery store, but in its own way it worked. Life in these caves shaped the rhythm of early existence. At dawn, hunters slipped out, clutching stone tools, their breath misting in the morning air. The rest of the group gathered berries, dug for roots, or tended to children inside the cave's dim glow. Returning at night, families told stories, though not in words as we know them, but in gestures, sounds, and shared gazes. Perhaps laughter echoed, the kind born from nervous relief after a narrow escape. And maybe there were jokes about clumsy hunters tripping over rocks, because even then was a balm against fear. The cave was more than a shelter. It was a womb of stone where early humans began to dream, to imagine, and to slowly weave together the first fragile threads of community. Every scrape of flint, every careful step deeper into the shadows carried them one step closer to becoming us. Stone is everywhere. To modern eyes, a pebble is just a nuisance you kick off the path. But to early humans, each shard held possibility. Imagine crouching by a riverbank, your fingers brushing smooth stones, until crack a rock splits, and one side reveals a razor-sharp edge. That edge is survival. It can slice through animal hide, scrape marrow from bone, or cut fibers for weaving. Suddenly, dinner isn't limited to what your teeth can tear apart. The earliest tools, called Oldowan tools, are astonishingly simple, sharp flakes struck from larger rocks. Think of them as the Swiss army knives of the prehistoric world, tiny but endlessly useful. With one in hand, a hunter could butcher a fallen antelope, or a mother could scrape tubers free of grit before feeding them to her children. Later, humans learned to shape more refined hand axes, teardrop-shaped stones, sharpened along both edges. These weren't delicate instruments. They were rugged companions, heavy in the hand with the power to crack open even the thickest skull for its brain-delicious calories if you didn't mind the texture. Of course, not everyone in the band became a master napper. Some struck rocks, clumsily producing lumps better suited as paperweights if only paper had existed. Imagine the laughter when someone proudly held up a crooked, dull tool that looked more like a potato than a blade. Even in the Stone Age, bragging rights mattered, and the best tool makers must have strutted around like early celebrities. Archaeologists believe these tools marked a turning point. With sharp edges, our ancestors could scavenge carcasses before lions returned, prying away meat scraps that otherwise would have gone to waste. This scavenging may have been as important as hunting itself. Some scientists debate whether the first humans were fearsome hunters or opportunistic scavengers who grabbed leftovers from more powerful predators. Maybe both were true, depending on the season and bravery of the group. And here's a quirky tidbit evidence shows that some tools were carried long distances, suggesting early humans already had a sense of favorite rocks. Certain volcanic stones, like obsidian, made sharper edges, so people might have traded them or trekked miles to collect them. Imagine trudging through rain and mud just because you had a crush on a particular shiny rock, kind of like walking across town today for the perfect cup of coffee. With tools came new strategies. Hunters could strip branches to fashion crude spears, sharpen stakes for digging, or carve grooves into bones. Suddenly humans weren't just reacting to the world. They were reshaping it. They were no longer bound entirely by the limitations of their hands and teeth. A tool extended their body like a metal claw or a stone fang. The impact rippled beyond survival. Making tools required focus, patience, and teaching. One person would demonstrate striking a rock at just the right angle, and another would mimic failing and trying again. This transfer of knowledge, silent instruction through gesture, laid foundations for culture itself. The very act of passing down skills hinted at something revolutionary: continuity across generations. Picture a group gathered near a cave mouth, sparks flying as stones collide. The air smells of crushed flint dust. A child watches wide-eyed, absorbing not just the technique, but also the unspoken lesson that with persistence, sharpness emerges from the dull. That's as close to a prehistoric TED Talk as you'll get. And still scientists debate whether tool use drove brain growth, or whether a bigger brain simply allowed better tools. Did making sharper stones spark sharper minds? Or did evolving minds finally unlock the secrets hidden in stone? The answer may lie somewhere in the middle, as most good answers do. Whatever the case, once humans discovered tools, they never looked back. every strike of flint against rock echoed into the future, paving the way for everything from plows to smartphones. The stone tool was not just a survival device. It was the first whisper that humans would someday dominate their environment instead of trembling within it. The cave grows warmer with bodies pressed close. But something else glues these little clusters of humans together, bonds that run deeper than mere survival. In the dim glow of twilight, families lean into each other, trading warmth, food, and protection. These bonds are not just practical, they are emotional, even tender. Without strong social ties, early humans would have been little more than frightened individuals clinging to scraps of food. With them, they became something greater, a community. Archaeologists suggest that early human groups often numbered around 20 to 40 individuals, a manageable size, where everyone knew each other's strengths and weaknesses. One person might be the skilled tool napper, another, the relentless tracker, another, the one who always knew which berries wouldn't make you regret breakfast. Imagine the nightly debates over food distribution. You get a bigger chunk because you didn't run screaming from the rabbit this morning. Yes, even then people probably poked fun at each other. Humor helps smooth ruffled feathers, especially when your dinner is a single roasted lizard. The role of family was paramount. Children weren't just cared for by parents, but by the group as a whole. Anthropologists call this alloparenting, and it meant grandparents, aunts, and even unrelated adults helped raise the young. This strategy ensured survival. After all, in a harsh world, where danger lurked at every corner, it took many watchful eyes to keep toddlers from wandering too close to a cliff edge. It's possible that the extended family model of cooperation gave humans a leg up compared to other primates, who tended to rely more heavily on the mother alone. Quirky tidbit scientists have discovered tooth marks on ancient bones, suggesting that even dogs, or at least proto-dogs, wolves, hanging around the edges of human camps, might have shared scraps. Whether those early wolves were beloved pets or tolerated freeloaders remains debated. But imagine little children sneaking bones to furry companions in the shadows, while parents shook their heads. Some things never change. Conflict, of course, still brewed within these groups. Jealousy, competition, and anger were natural. A hunter who hoarded meat might face sharp words or sharp stones. Yet the necessity of cooperation usually outweighed grudges. If you didn't share today, someone might refuse to share tomorrow. It's the original, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Scientists still debate whether this tight social fabric, more than tools or fire, was the true catalyst for human progress. Some argue that brains grew larger, not simply because of better food, but because navigating the complex web of relationships demanded greater intelligence. Remembering who owed you a favor, who might betray you, or who made the best jokes, could have sharpened minds just as much as cracking bones. By night the cave filled with soft murmurs, perhaps not full words yet, but grunts, laughs, and imitated sounds that hinted at language's dawn. By day the same bonds played out in cooperative hunts or group foraging trips. Unity gave them courage to stalk larger prey and resilience to endure leaner times. And so, within these families and bands, the human spirit began to bloom. Not through solitary triumphs, but through laughter, shared meals, and the unspoken comfort of knowing that someone had your back when the shadows lengthened and the lions prowled. The cave was more than shelter. It was the cradle of society itself. The morning light spills across the plains golden and hazy as hunters prepare to move. Their muscles are tense, their eyes sharp, their stone tools secured in leather pouches. Ahead lies a vast sweep of grassland dotted with herds of mammoths, aurochs, and deer. These are no passive targets, they are enormous wary and often dangerously quick to charge. But for early humans, following the herds is the difference between full bellies and hollow stomachs. Tracking becomes an art. Footprints pressed into damp soil reveal how recently a herd passed, and broken twigs hint at their direction. Hunters sniff the air like wolves searching for the musk of prey. Imagine crouching beside a mammoth print so large you could curl a child inside it. That's when you know the chase will not be easy. Patience is everything. Sometimes hunters trail a single animal for days, waiting for exhaustion or injury to weaken it. This strategy, known as persistence hunting, is one of the quirkiest yet most impressive techniques in human history. Armed with nothing more than spears and endurance, humans could outlast creatures far stronger and faster by simply jogging them into collapse. Picture running after an antelope for 8 straight hours. It sounds absurd, but with sweat glands and 2 legs built for long distances, humans had a secret advantage. They could keep cool while their prey overheated. Imagine explaining that to your gym instructor today. Yes, I ran a marathon, but only to make my dinner faint. Of course, not every hunt ended triumphantly. Spears could miss. A startled herd might stampede, scattering hunters and leaving bruises or worse. Sometimes hunters returned with nothing, their families forced to rely on gathered nuts and roots. And let's not forget the jokes told around the fire about the hunter who tripped over a rabbit hole and scared off a whole herd. Even in prehistory, comic relief was a survival tool. Mainstream history notes that such group hunts required extraordinary coordination. Early humans had to plan roles. Some drove animals toward hidden ambushes. Others waited with spears raised. Cooperation turned hunting from a reckless gamble into a calculated strategy. This teamwork also fostered bonds that carried into every other part of life. And yet scientists debate just how central hunting was to survival. Some argue meat was the foundation of human evolution, fueling brain growth with rich calories. Others point out that gathered plants may have provided more reliable sustenance, with hunting being more feast or famine. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the balanced roots and berries for daily energy, with meat as the prize that brought joy and celebration. Quirky tidbit evidence from ancient kill sites suggests early humans sometimes drove entire herds off cliffs. Imagine dozens of giant animals tumbling down rocky slopes while hunters cheered from above. It was brutal, efficient, and a little slapstick if you can ignore the terrifying chaos of a mammoth pile-up. Out on the plains, hunters follow step after patient step, learning the rhythm of beasts. Each track, each broken branch, each tuft of fur stuck to bark is a clue. They aren't just chasing animals, they are decoding the language of the wild. And in doing so, they take one more stride toward mastering a world that had once seemed untamable. Hunting brought excitement, but foraging was the steady heartbeat of survival. While hunters tracked across plains for days, gatherers bent low among the brush fingers stained with berry juice, eyes sharp for edible roots. Each leaf, nut, and seed represented both nourishment and risk. Pick the wrong berry, and your stomach might churn for hours or worse, never recover. The knowledge of plants was as crucial as any spear. Imagine a small group moving through a forest, sunlight dappling the ground. Children scurry about plucking bright red berries with enthusiasm, only to be scolded. Not those remember what happened last time. A wise elder points out which roots can be roasted, which leaves can soothe wounds, and which mushrooms should never ever be touched. This oral encyclopedia of the forest, passed down from generation to generation, often wrapped in cautionary tales. Don't eat the little green berries, unless you want to see spirits dancing in the trees. Half joke, half genuine warning, it's stuck in the mind. Mainstream historical fact tells us that foraging likely provided the bulk of calories for early humans. Seeds, nuts, fruits, and tubers were reliable, portable, and less dangerous to acquire than mammoth steaks. Archaeological digs reveal grinding stones with traces of starch, suggesting people were processing wild grains long before farming. That flatbread you enjoy today may trace its roots back tens of thousands of years to someone pounding grass seeds into mush. And then there's the quirky tidbit evidence suggests humans sometimes chewed bitter plants with medicinal properties like willow bark, which contains salicylic acid, the base of modern aspirin. So yes, your prehistoric ancestor may have invented the original headache cure while gnawing bark out of desperation. Nature's pharmacy was all around if you had the stomach and courage to try. Of course, experimentation didn't always go smoothly. Scientists still debate whether humans learned through cautious testing or reckless trial and error. Did one unlucky soul collapse after tasting a toxic mushroom, while others made a mental note never to touch it again? Or were there careful testers? Small nibbles, long waits, cautious observations that gradually built knowledge without too much tragedy. Either way, the process was messy, but essential. Gathering was not just survival, it was social. Imagine families moving through meadows, children laughing as they climbed trees for fruit, while adults debated the best spots for digging yams. Someone no doubt cracked jokes about who had the biggest berry basket. These shared tasks bonded groups as much as hunting did, perhaps even more. Unlike the adrenaline-fueled chase, foraging allowed long conversations, stories, and perhaps the first seeds of gossip. And foraging shaped more than diet. It influenced migration patterns. People followed seasonal blooms, knowing when nuts would ripen, or when fruit trees would be heavy. This deep calendar of nature became the map by which they lived, a rhythm set not by clocks or calendars, but by blossoms, rains, and harvests. In the soft light of evening baskets full, the gatherers returned to the cave. Meals were humble, but sustaining roots roasted in embers, seeds pounded into paste berries eaten fresh. And when a successful hunt added meat to the mix, the feast became a true celebration. The taste of roots and berries may sound plain today, but for those early humans, it was the dependable thread that stitched together each fragile day. Deep inside the cave, beyond the damp smell of earth and the occasional drip of water, something remarkable begins to appear: art. Not the kind framed in museums, but vivid scenes scratched and painted onto stone walls by flickering torchlight. Hands press pigment against rock, leaving outlines like ghostly signatures, proof that someone once stood here, someone who wanted to be remembered. The most famous examples, like those in Lascaux and Chauvet in France, show bison, horses, and lions rendered with surprising skill. The animals seem to move when firelight dances across the walls, their muscles rippling, their eyes alive. To stand before them is to realize that creativity is not a modern invention. It is ancient, primal, and tied to the very essence of being human. Mainstream archaeology dates these works to more than 30,000 years ago, though scholars still debate whether the earliest sparks of art could stretch back even further. Why did they do it? That's the lingering question. Some suggest the paintings were hunting magic visual prayers for success in tomorrow's chase. Others believe they were teaching tools lessons for younger hunters about which animals to pursue. Still others argue they were simply expressions of beauty, the same way we doodle in notebooks during boring meetings. Scientists are still debating whether art was a practical survival tool or the first expression of the human soul. A quirky tidbit among the paintings: archaeologists have found strange dot spirals and even what look suspiciously like early calendars. Imagine an ancient human staring at a wall covered in dots, trying to track the moon's cycle. One dot for each night. Whoops, lost count. Early Excel spreadsheets carved in limestone. But the handprints are the most haunting. Some are small, belonging to children. Others are larger adult hands outlined in red or black. They whisper across time, I was here. I mattered. You can almost picture a child giggling as they press their palm against cool stone, leaving a mark to join the group's silent gallery. Maybe parents even teased each other. Your fingers are crooked. Look how lopsided your handprint is. Humor doesn't vanish even when painted in ochre. Creating art required more than inspiration. It demanded technology. Pigments were made by grinding minerals like iron oxide into powder, mixing them with animal fat or saliva, and blowing them through hollow bones. Imagine the mess red dust coating noses, children sneezing pigment clouds, adults fussing to keep the firelight steady. The scene was as chaotic as any modern family craft night. Still, through this chaos, something profound took shape. The cave became more than shelter. It became a gallery, a place where memories, hopes, and imaginations were etched into permanence. The paintings remind us that early humans weren't just surviving. They were dreaming storytelling and claiming their place in a vast, mysterious world. And tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine standing in that cave. The torch flickers. The walls come alive. Horses gallop, bison charge, lions leap, and behind it, all the quiet laughter of a family leaving its mark, hoping the future would remember. The cave echoes not only with art, but with sound. At first it is grunts, whistles, and gestures, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, those sounds grow into something more. Picture a group huddled together, one pointing toward the forest, uttering a sharp bark that everyone recognizes as danger. Another coos to a child stringing sounds together in ways that feel soothing. Bit by bit, language stirs to life. Mainstream historical facts suggest that spoken language may have appeared around 50,000 or so 100,000 years ago, though scholars still wrestle with the timeline. Some argue Neanderthals had the capacity for speech too. Their hyoid bones, tiny structures in the throat, hinting at vocal abilities. Others disagree, insisting true complex language was unique to Homo sapiens. The debate continues, was language an ancient shared gift or a secret advantage that allowed our lineage to triumph? In practical terms, words change everything. A hunt becomes more organized when you can whisper left now behind you. Food sharing becomes smoother with mine and yours. But language also births something else entirely: laughter. Humor, once confined to gestures and silly faces, now has words to play with. Imagine a hunter tripping and someone imitating the stumble while chanting nonsense syllables that send the group into howls of laughter. Early humans discovered that words didn't just share information, they shared joy. Quirky tidbit: some anthropologists believe laughter itself may be older than speech. A primal bonding tool inherited from our primate cousins. Chimps laugh when tickled after all. But once language arrived, laughter could be shaped into puns, jokes, and playful teases. Your spear is shorter than a rabbit's tail might have been a cutting insult, pun intended. The birth of language also deepened memory. Now stories could be told, not just mimed. An elder might recount a successful hunt from years before, their voice rising and falling, as children lean closer, eyes wide. Over time, these stories stretch further back, becoming myths about how the sun was caught in a net, or why rivers sang. Words gave humans the power to carry not only knowledge, but imagination. Scientists are still debating whether language developed gradually, grunts evolving step by step, or whether it appeared in a sudden cognitive leap like a light switch being flipped. Either way, once speech took root, it spread like wildfire through communities, reshaping the very rhythm of human life. In the evening, as fire crackles faintly, if they're lucky enough to have kept it alive, families talk, not in paragraphs yet, but in syllables, repeated sounds, the seeds of conversation. And with every new sound, the human brain grows sharper, more social, more daring. So imagine lying there in the dark cave, listening not only to the distant growl of predators, but also to the rising murmur of your people experimenting with sounds. Someone tries a new word, and everyone bursts out laughing at how silly it sounds. Another repeats it, and suddenly it sticks. From these small experiments, language blossoms an invention as powerful as fire itself, and one that will never be extinguished. Somewhere on the edge of a storm, a bolt of lightning slashes across the sky. Thunder follows, booming like the voice of an angry god, and then there it is, flames licking at a tree. Early humans gather at a distance, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Fire is terrifying. It roars, it devours, it spits sparks like angry bees. And yet, in that moment, it is also irresistible. The first flicker of fire in human hands did not come from matches or lighters, but from nature itself. Lightning strikes volcanic eruptions, even the smouldering embers of wildfires, all were the earliest teachers. Some brave soul dared to approach the glowing coals, perhaps with a branch carrying the flame back to a cave. That moment, one trembling hand clutching a burning stick was nothing short of revolutionary. Mainstream historical facts suggest humans first controlled fire at least 1 million years ago, though evidence is patchy. At sites like Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, archaeologists have found ash and charred bones that hint at fire use 500,000 years earlier than once believed. But scientists are still debating whether these fires were truly tamed by humans, or simply natural blazes they stumbled upon. The problem wasn't starting fire, it was keeping it. Without matches, once flames died, so did warmth, light, and safety. Imagine the frantic scramble when a fire guttered out in the night, adults blowing desperately on embers, children scouring the ground for dry twigs, everyone groaning when smoke rose, but no flame returned. Some groups may have carried fire with them, protecting smouldering branches inside bundles of bark or animal dung like precious cargo. Picture a Stone Age traveller muttering, "Don't trip, don't sneeze, don't drop it. We lose this, and we're toast." Literally. And here's a quirky tidbit. There's evidence that even Neanderthals used fire, though not always consistently. Some archaeological layers are rich with charcoal, while others are barren, suggesting they sometimes went without. Maybe they weren't as obsessive about keeping fire alive, or maybe they just had worse luck with storm chasing. The first encounters with fire must have been awe-inspiring. Flames danced, shadows stretched into monstrous forms, sparks floated upward like tiny stars. It wasn't just heat and light, it was mystery, danger, and magic. Children probably squealed in delight, while adults muttered nervously, weighing whether this glowing beast was a gift or a curse. Scientists still debate whether control of fire spread gradually, pockets of groups discovering it at different times, or whether it was shared widely once mastered. What is certain is that once humans began to hold fire in their hands, their destiny shifted forever. On one stormy night in a cave damp with fear, a single torch might have glowed, held aloft by trembling fingers. The faces that gathered around it saw not just survival, but possibility. And though they could not know it, that flicker was the spark that would someday light cities' power machines and even fuel the glowing screens we stare at today. The fire crackles, spitting tiny sparks that float upward like orange fireflies. For the first time, night is no longer a black void full of unseen terrors. Shadows still dance on the cave walls, but now they move in rhythm with the flames, not with prowling predators. The warmth seeps into aching bones, turning icy nights into bearable ones. Fire does more than heat bodies, it soothes minds. Mainstream historical fact shows that fire transformed early human life in three critical ways: warmth, light, and safety. Warmth meant survival in colder climates, where before humans had huddled miserably under furs. Light extended the day, allowing tasks, conversations, and storytelling long after sunset. And safety, oh glorious safety, because fire scared away predators that once crept too close. A lion's gleaming eyes hesitate at the edge of firelight, and a hyena slinks back into the dark, snarling in frustration. Imagine the relief parents able to close their eyes for a few moments, knowing a glowing barrier stood between their children and the night. Quirky tidbit: some anthropologists suggest humans may even have started sleeping in longer, deeper cycles thanks to fire. The watchful need to stay alert through the night softened, replaced by shared confidence in the protective circle of flame. You could say fire invented the first nightlight, but it wasn't only practical. Fire drew people together, creating the first hearths. Picture a cluster of faces, orange glow on their skin eyes, reflecting sparks. Food is passed around, jokes, exchange, stories told. One hunter mimes the ridiculous way a deer slipped on ice, and laughter erupts, bouncing off stone walls. The fire isn't just a tool, it's the center of community. Scientists are still debating whether fire's psychological comfort was as important as its physical benefits. Did the sight of flames so mesmerizing and hypnotic calm anxious minds? Some argue fire even reshaped the human brain by giving space for longer conversations, planning, and bonding. In the hush of evening, with danger pushed back into the shadows, humans could think bigger thoughts. And of course there were accidents. Sparks burned holes in furs, children reached too close and yelped, adults argued over who was supposed to gather wood. Imagine the nightly ritual of who forgot to add logs. Now we're all freezing. Even so, the benefits far outweighed the frustrations. The firelight carved out the first true indoors, a space both physical and emotional. Inside its glow, humans felt safe enough to laugh, to dream, to begin imagining futures instead of just surviving the present. It was the hearthstone upon which all later civilization would be built. So the fire crackles, the darkness stays at bay, and humans for the first time breathe deeply, daring to feel not just alive, but secure. The flames dance higher, and with them comes an idea so simple, yet so world-changing. What if we put food into this fire? At first, it's likely an accident. A chunk of meat slips too close to the embers, sizzling, smoking, filling the air with a smell unlike anything before. Someone brave takes a bite, chews thoughtfully, and suddenly realizes this tastes better. And not only better, but easier to chew, easier to swallow, easier to digest. Mainstream historical fact tells us that cooking transformed human nutrition. Heat breaks down tough fibers in meat and plants, releasing calories that raw chewing can't unlock. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham famously argued that cooking may have been the decisive factor in the rapid growth of the human brain. By eating softer, more calorie-rich foods, our ancestors could fuel bigger brains without wearing their jaws down to stubs. But scientists are still debating whether cooking alone deserves that crown, or whether cooperation and hunting played equal roles. Cooking also changes food safety. Flames kill parasites and bacteria that once threatened every meal. Imagine the relief of not worrying whether that slab of mammoth might fight back from the inside later. It's hard to overstate what a difference it made. And then there's the quirky tidbit. The earliest cooks probably didn't have recipes, but they certainly experimented. Some roots turned sweet when roasted, Others turned into inedible charcoal. Someone somewhere tried roasting a beetle and discovered it popped like popcorn. Others probably burned their tongues and muttered the prehistoric version of "why did I do that again?" Trial and error was messy, but delicious progress came from it. Cooking also meant more than nutrition, it created ritual. Families gathered around fire not only for warmth, but for meals. Food was no longer scavenged and gnawed in the shadows. It was shared, prepared, transformed. The smell of roasting meat drifting into the night must have stirred pride and community. It wasn't just fuel anymore. It was cuisine, primitive, but powerful. Firelight extended dinner time into social time. Jokes were told, stories acted out, perhaps even songs hummed. Some scientists argue that fire's biggest impact wasn't on the stomach, but on the soul. By giving humans time to sit, talk, and dream, it reshaped culture itself. Imagine a circle of early humans now. Meat sizzling on sticks' roots, steaming children impatiently grabbing at hot food, while adults scold with laughter. The cave fills with scents rich and comforting. Outside predators still lurk, but inside bellies grow full, minds grow sharper, and the first whispers of civilization rise with the smoke. The leap from raw to cooked food is nothing less than revolutionary. It is not just dinner, it is the spark that fuels the journey from survival to society. Bellies full, minds sharper, and nights warmer. Yet one question lingers. Why did our brains expand so dramatically compared to other animals? Fire and cooking certainly played a role, but were they the decisive factor? Scientists are still debating their arguments, crackling like sparks. One mainstream explanation is the expensive tissue hypothesis. Brains are greedy organs consuming a massive share of the body's energy. Raw diets of leaves and roots couldn't possibly sustain such a fuel-hungry machine. Cooking changed the math. Softer, calorie-rich meals meant less time chewing and more energy left over for neurons. In this view, fire turned us into big-brain dreamers. But another camp argues it wasn't food alone. It was social complexity. Living in groups demanded memory strategy and emotional intelligence. To survive, you had to remember who owed you meat, who stole your berries, and who made you laugh when the cave dripped too loudly. Some scholars call this the social brain hypothesis, suggesting that gossip alliances and cooperation were the real engines of cognitive growth. If you've ever tried to keep up with family drama, you know how much brain power that requires. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some scientists have even proposed that humans' love of storytelling, yes, sitting around the fire, inventing tales about giant sky spirits or heroic hunters, shaped the brain as much as diet. Storytelling encouraged imagination, empathy, and shared values. In other words, your brain might have gotten bigger because your ancestors loved swapping ghost stories to spook each other. Of course, nothing happens in isolation. Fire and cooking improved nutrition, while social bonds stretched the brain in new ways. Add in tool-making, hunting, and foraging knowledge, and you get a cocktail of pressures pushing intelligence upward. No single answer satisfies everyone, which is fitting. Our species thrives on debate. Imagine the scene: a group gathered at the fire, voices rising in chatter. One person brags about their hunting skills, another cracks a joke, children mimic words, elders offer advice. Above the laughter and argument, sparks float into the dark sky like tiny questions. Each spark is an idea. What if we shape the stone this way? What if we follow the herd tomorrow? What if the stars are eyes watching us? That ability to wonder, to ask, to imagine, this is where the brain's true magic lies. Bigger brains gave humans the power not just to survive the world, but to picture a world different from the one they stood in. And from that imagining came everything else: villages, art, music, and eventually the very story you're listening to tonight. As the fire kept burning and bellies stayed full, something new began to stir in human life scale. Small family bands weren't enough anymore. Groups slowly grew larger, merging into camps where dozens, sometimes even hundreds of people lived side by side. With growth came both opportunity and chaos. Mainstream historical fact tells us that larger gatherings left clear traces, rings of hearths, middens filled with discarded bones and open spaces that look suspiciously like meeting grounds. At sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic, archaeologists have found evidence of camps that may have hosted entire seasonal festivals, complete with rituals and art. Suddenly, life wasn't just about scraping by with your closest relatives. It was about being part of something bigger. Bigger groups meant stronger protection, more eyes to spot predators, more hunters to chase herds, more gatherers to collect roots and seeds. But it also meant more arguments. Picture two families squabbling over who gets the best spot near the fire. Someone jokes about charging rent, and suddenly half the camp is laughing while the other half is sulking. Humor once again becomes the duct tape that holds everything together. Quirky tidbit: some archaeologists believe that music may have appeared around this time. Simple flutes carved from bird bones or mammoth tusks have been found dating back over 35,000 years. Imagine nights in these growing camps, fires blazing, and someone pulling out a flute to play a wobbly tune. Children clap, adults hum, and suddenly the dark night is filled not just with fear or chatter, but with melody. Early humans didn't invent TikTok dances, but they definitely knew how to party. Scientists are still debating what held these bigger communities together. Was it shared rituals, perhaps dances, chants, or symbolic objects that created unity? Or was it the sheer practicality of survival where cooperation outweighed friction? Whatever the answer, it's clear that larger groups required new levels of organization. People began to specialize, some focused on tool-making, others on healing, others on teaching children. It was the faint beginning of division of labor. These camps also made room for strangers. Travelers from other groups could arrive bringing news ideas and perhaps the first whispers of trade. A shiny stone from far away, a unique technique for sharpening spears, even a new story to tell. Suddenly human culture began to stretch beyond the limits of a single band. At night, fires glowed like constellations across the plains. Each camp a beacon, each hearth a center of human warmth and invention, and within them, laughter, song, argument, and storytelling, braided together, weaving the fabric of a society that was growing stronger, stranger, and more connected than ever before. As communities swelled with more people and more needs, creativity stretched beyond stone. A hunter dragging home a fresh kill didn't just drop bones into the refuse pile. Someone looked at a rib or antler and thought this could be useful. Soon humans were carving, scraping, and reshaping materials that once seemed like waste. Mainstream historical fact confirms this ingenuity. Archaeologists have uncovered delicate needles made from bone, complete with drilled eyes for threading sinew. Imagine the patience it took to file a bone down with stone tools until it was smooth and sharp. With these hides could be stitched into tighter, warmer clothing. Suddenly humans could step confidently into colder climates, wrapped in furs that didn't flap awkwardly around the body. Sewing wasn't just fashion, it was survival couture. Other bone tools became barbed points for fishing or awls for piercing leather. Antlers were sharpened into digging sticks or wielded as weapons. Each innovation expanded what humans could do. A hunter with a barbed spear suddenly had an edge against swift fish darting through rivers. A seamstress with a bone needle turned rough hides into garments that actually fit. That's prehistoric luxury. Quirky tidbit: at some sites, archaeologists have found bones carved into ornaments, beads, pendants, even tiny figurines. One of the most famous is the Venus of Whole Fells, a voluptuous little figurine carved from mammoth ivory more than 35,000 years ago. Scholars debate its meaning: fertility charm art piece or prehistoric gag gift. Maybe it was all three. Humor and symbolism may have been tangled together in ways we'll never fully grasp. Scientists are still debating whether these creative leaps were driven by necessity or by culture. Did people carve beads because they had spare time after successful hunts? Or because wearing decoration marked status and identity? Was it about beauty belief or bragging rights? Whatever the motivation, the fact remains humans were no longer satisfied with the bare minimum. They wanted tools that were sharper, clothing that was warmer, and objects that spoke to something deeper inside them. Picture a busy camp, one person napping flint, another scraping bone into shape, children stringing beads onto sinew, elders humming softly as they stitch hides. The air hums with invention. Laughter rises when a needle snaps and two groans echo, when a bead rolls into the dirt and pride gleams, when a child shows off their very first bone tool. These tools of bone and antler were more than practical. They were stepping stones toward craftsmanship, art, and identity. They carried humans further along the path from survival to culture, proving that even in the harshest world, creativity would always find a way to shine. With sharper tools, sturdier clothes, and growing communities, humans found themselves restless. They were no longer tied to one valley or cave. Instead, they became wanderers, following the shifting seasons like rivers of time. The nomadic life was both challenge and opportunity, a rhythm dictated by migration of animals, ripening of plants, and the harsh swing between winter and summer. Mainstream historical fact confirms that humans spread astonishingly far. From Africa, our original home small bands trekked into the Middle East, then into Europe and Asia. By 40,000 years ago, humans had reached Australia, crossing stretches of open water in makeshift rafts. By 15,000 years ago, they had crossed icy land bridges into the Americas. Each step carried them into unfamiliar climates, landscapes, and dangers. Migration wasn't just random wandering. It was guided by knowledge: where herds grazed in spring, where berries grew in summer, where caves offered shelter in winter. Imagine a family debating north where the mammoths roam, or west where the rivers run fat with fish. These choices were life and death strategy sessions, punctuated no doubt with groans from children tired of walking. Quirky tidbit: scientists believe that during these migrations, humans may have accidentally wiped out entire species simply by hunting too effectively. The giant woolly rhino, the towering mammoth, even giant sloths in the Americas may have fallen victim not just to climate change, but also to hungry nomads. If true, we could say humans were the original overachievers in the department of eat everything in sight. Yet nomadic life wasn't only about taking, it was about discovering. As groups moved, they encountered mountains capped with snow forests, buzzing with insects, deserts shimmering with heat. Each environment demanded adaptation: new clothes, new tools, new ways of thinking. Some scientists argue this constant challenge was itself a driver of intelligence. To survive in diverse landscapes, humans had to innovate again and again. Of course, migration brought frustration too. Picture trudging across a windswept plain, snow stinging your face while someone mutters, "Are we there yet?" Or imagine arriving at a river swollen with floodwater, the whole camp staring gloomily as their carefully planned route washes away. Complaints are universal across time, but migration also meant wonder. Standing on a cliff's edge, watching herds stretch to the horizon, or seeing the ocean for the first time. These were moments that etched themselves into memory. Around the fire, travelers surely retold such sights, exaggerating for effect. The fish were as big as trees one storyteller might boast, to the laughter and skepticism of the group. Nomadic life was a dance with the earth itself each season, a partner, leading humans into new places. And step by step, mile by mile, humans transformed from cave dwellers into world walkers, carrying with them fire tools, laughter, and dreams that reached farther than the horizon. As groups roamed farther, they soon discovered they weren't the only humans on Earth. Imagine cresting a hill and spotting figures in the distance, stocky, broad-shouldered, with heavy brows and powerful builds. These were Neanderthals' cousins who had lived in Europe and parts of Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Later, in caves tucked deep in Siberia, scientists would find traces of yet another group, the Denisovans, their presence preserved not in skeletons, but in fragments of DNA. Mainstream historical fact tells us that these encounters were complex. Sometimes they ended in violence, with groups competing for territory or resources. Other times, they led to trade, shared knowledge, or even interbreeding. Today, many people outside Africa carry small percentages of Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA, living proof that these meetings shaped who we are. Picture the scene: a cautious standoff at first, spears gripped tightly, eyes narrowed in suspicion, but then slowly curiosity overcomes fear. A shiny stone tool is exchanged for a bundle of dried meat. Perhaps a laugh follows when one imitates the other's walk. Step by step, strangers become acquaintances. It's the world's first networking event, minus the name tags. Quirky tidbit genetic studies suggest that some Neanderthals may have had red hair and pale skin, while others carried genes that today influence our immune systems. In other words, those awkward family reunions you dread, they might stretch back tens of thousands of years. Yes, Grandma, I know I look like Uncle Neanderthal. Thanks for pointing it out. Scientists are still debating the nature of these relationships. Were Neanderthals equal partners in culture and intelligence, or were they overshadowed by Homo sapiens' adaptability? Did Denisovans contribute unique technologies, or were they absorbed too quickly to leave much behind? Some evidence points to Neanderthals creating art and tools as sophisticated as ours, which challenges the old stereotype of them as brutish cave dwellers. The truth is probably richer, more nuanced, and still unfolding with every new discovery. For early humans, these encounters must have been a mix of fear, fascination, and opportunity. Meeting another group that looked almost like you, but not quite, must have raised questions that words couldn't yet capture. Were they enemies, allies, or something in between? And yet, the fact that traces of their DNA live in us today means that at least sometimes bonds went beyond rivalry. Around a fire, two groups may have sat together sharing food, exchanging gestures, even laughing at the absurdity of their differences. In those flickering shadows, the boundaries between us and them blurred, and humanity's story grew more tangled, more beautiful, and more human. With fire to warm their nights and encounters with cousins broadening their world early, humans began to face the greatest mystery of all: death. No matter how strong the hunter, how skilled the gatherer, eventually sickness, injury, or age claimed them. And when that happened, their companions did something extraordinary. They did not simply abandon the body. They paused, they gathered, and they buried. Mainstream historical fact shows evidence of intentional burials as early as 100,000 years ago. In places like Shanidar Cave in Iraq, Neanderthal skeletons have been found carefully placed in shallow graves with hints of pollen, suggesting flowers may have been laid upon them. Whether this was ritual or mere coincidence is debated, but the idea that our ancestors honored their dead with care reshapes how we think of them. These were not cold survivors. They were people with compassion. Imagine the scene: a group gathered in solemn silence, torches flickering as they lower a companion into the earth. Children clutch parents, adults murmur words or gestures we can no longer decode. Perhaps someone sprinkles red ochre dust over the body, turning the burial into a vivid ritual of color. In that moment, grief is shared and memory is born. Scientists are still debating what these early burials meant. Were they practical, keeping disease away from the living? Or were they spiritual, hinting at beliefs in an afterlife? Some argue that symbolic thought must have been present, that flowers, pigments, and arranged bones reveal a dawning awareness of something beyond life. Others insist that practicality may explain it all, with ritual coming much later. Quirky tidbit: at one burial site, a skeleton was discovered with a withered arm that had been cared for long before death. This suggests the individual was supported by their group, despite being unable to hunt or fight. Compassion, not just strength, was already woven into humanity's fabric. Burial rituals also created stories. Around the fire, children might whisper about spirits watching from the night sky, or about ancestors guiding the hunt. Fear and comfort mixed, giving rise to belief systems that would one day grow into full religions. Even the stars overhead may have become graves of light, each one a reminder of a soul departed. So the cave was no longer only a shelter for the living, it became a resting place for the dead. In honoring their fallen humans, claimed something profound: the ability to see life not just as survival, but as part of a larger mysterious cycle. The world shifts again. After countless seasons of wandering, hunting, and gathering, some humans begin to notice patterns in the land. Seeds dropped near the fire pit sprout into green shoots. Grains collected one year grow back in the same place the next. Animals that linger near camps, wolves, goats, pigs, become accustomed to human presence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the idea takes root. What if we stay instead of roam? Mainstream, historical fact places the dawn of farming, known as the Neolithic Revolution, around 10,000 years ago in regions like the Fertile Crescent. Wheat, barley, lentils, and peas were among the first domesticated crops. Sheep, goats, and cattle followed. This shift changed everything. No longer did humans need to chase herds across endless plains. Instead, they could plant food, raise animals, and build permanent villages. Of course, farming was not an instant paradise. Imagine early experiments: someone carefully tending a patch of grain, only for wild animals to devour it overnight. Another group corrals goats only to watch them escape with mischievous ease. Jokes surely followed. So much for our brilliant idea of goat keeping. Progress was slow, full of trial and error, but persistence paid off. Quirky tidbit: some of the earliest beer may have come not from a deliberate recipe, but from stored grain that fermented by accident. Picture a villager sipping the strange frothy liquid, making a face, then taking another sip and laughing. Congratulations, humanity, you've just discovered happy hour. Scientists are still debating whether farming was a blessing or a curse. On one hand, it created stable food supplies, population growth, and the foundations of civilization. On the other, it led to harder labor, new diseases from close contact with animals, and social inequality. Farmers worked longer hours than foragers, and diets often became less varied. Some argue that agriculture was humanity's greatest mistake. Others call it our greatest triumph. Still, the transformation was undeniable. Villages replaced caves. Fields replaced endless wandering. Clay pots stored grain for winter, stone walls kept animals penned, and fires burned, not just for warmth, but for baking bread. For the first time, humans looked around and saw home not as a temporary shelter, but as a place meant to last. At night, the glow of hearths no longer moved with the seasons. Smoke rose from the same spot day after day, year after year. Children were born in the same place where their parents had been, and the dead were buried beneath the soil that fed the living. The rhythm of life shifted from the chase to the harvest, and with it, humanity stepped across a threshold into something entirely new. The journey from caves to fire, from wandering bands to farming villages, left behind more than bones and tools. It carved into humanity a legacy of resilience, creativity, and transformation. Imagine looking back over that vast timeline, the shivering figure clutching a stone flake in a damp cave, the cautious hunter trailing mammoths across snowy plains, the family laughing as smoke curled from the first roasted meal. Each step was fragile, yet together they formed the staircase to civilization. Fire was the thread binding it all. From its accidental discovery in a lightning strike to its careful nurturing in hearths, fire became the symbol of human progress. It gave warmth against icy night's light, against the unknown, safety against predators, and flavor against bland roots. Fire was the first technology and the eternal companion, the heartbeat of every gathering place. Caves, once mere shelters, became places of art, memory, and meaning. Handprints smeared in ochre whisper across tens of thousands of years. We were here, we dreamed, we loved. Bones carved into tools, beads strung into necklaces, and graves filled with ochre and flowers tell us that even in the harshest world, humans longed not just to live, but to live with beauty, dignity, and hope. Quirky tidbit archaeologists have even found evidence of prehistoric chewing gum, lumps of birch tar with tooth marks left behind by children. Imagine little ones giggling in the firelight, blowing bubbles that never popped. Proof that even then humans had time for play. Scientists are still debating which force mattered most, fire, food, social bonds, or imagination. But perhaps the real answer is that it was never one thing. It was everything woven together like sparks rising from a flame: necessity, curiosity, humor, and love. Now villages grow where caves once stood, fields stretch where herds once roamed, and stories flow where grunts once echoed. Yet deep inside, the memory of firelit caves still glows. Every campfire, every candle, every kitchen stove is a reminder of that first trembling hand clutching a burning branch. And so, from darkness to flame, from caves to hearths, early humans set the stage for everything to come. Cities, civilizations, even the quiet story you're listening to now. And now, as the echoes of this journey fade, let your mind soften, drifting like smoke from a gentle fire. Picture yourself lying back in the quiet of a cave, the walls cool against your skin, the flicker of flame painting shapes that dance and vanish. Outside, the night is deep and endless, but here, within the glow, you are safe. The predators are far away, their roars muted by distance, their eyes held back by the circle of light. The warmth settles into your body, loosening the last knots of tension. Every muscle sighs, every breath deepens, as if the fire itself exhales with you. Around you, others murmur softly, their voices low, almost a lullaby. The crackle of wood becomes the only rhythm you need to hear, steady and comforting, as though the earth itself keeps time for your rest. Above, sparks drift upward, fading into the dark sky, like tiny stars born and gone in an instant. Imagine your worries as those sparks lifting away, glowing briefly before dissolving into calm. Each spark is a thought you no longer need to hold. Each flame a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can be kindled, warmth can be found. The cave breathes around you. The fire whispers. You are connected to a chain of people stretching back through millennia, those who laughed, who dreamed, who pressed their hands to stone and hoped to be remembered. Tonight you honor them not with struggle, but with peace. So close your eyes. Let the fire's glow sink deeper until it becomes the soft warmth of sleep itself. Drift with it, carried on the quiet tide of history into a place where dreams rise gently like smoke curling toward the stars.